Tonight, it's a lock, it's a landslide. That's not exactly how this has turned out. Why were they so sure earlier today?
Shannon, this is the most extensive word that we've gotten from the campaign right now. The chairman is speaking as I am, but he just came out to say that the night is not over for the Moore supporters who are gathered here because they are hoping to get the margin within 0.5% to trigger an automatic recount. This is the first official mention of the possibility of a recount that we have heard from here, but they're talking about a recount and they are not talking about any kind of a concession. So we know that Judge Moore has been here at one point. They did turn off the TV. They stopped showing the New York Times tracker of all the counties that were coming in blue that led the networks to call it. And actually, they came out and asked the people here to keep the faith, and they started singing hymns. I took notes. There was, "Great is thy faithfulness, how great thou art. All hail the power of Jesus, his name." The very quiet crowd was singing with a group of young people who were up on the stage, but things are not over the way that the Moore campaign sees it right now. To that end, though, up on Capitol Hill, I am also getting some new reaction tonight. And you know what? Here's Roy Moore, Shannon.
Let's listen in, Peter.
Thank you. You know, I really want to thank you for coming tonight and realize when the vote is this close that it's not over. And we still got to go by the rules about this recount provision. And the Secretary of State has explained it to us, and we're expecting that the press will go up there and talk to them to find out what the situation is. But we also know that God is always in control. You know, part of the problem with this campaign is we've been painted in an unfavorable and unfaithful light. We've been put in a hole, if you will, and it reminds me of a passage in Psalm 40. I waited patiently for the Lord. That's what we've got to do. And he inclined to me and heard my cry and brought us up also out of a horrible pit, out of miry clay, and set my feet on the rock and established my goings and put a new song in our mouth, even praise unto our God. Many shall see it and hear it and shall be moved by that, if you will. And that's what we've got to do, is wait on God and let this process play out. I know it's late. We can't wait and have everybody wait till after 11 o'clock. But the votes are still coming in, and we're looking at that. May God bless you as you go on. May he give you a safe journey, and thank you for coming tonight. It's not over, and it's going to take some time. Thank you.
Okay, so not a concession speech from Roy Moore tonight, although we and just about every other outlet there has called this race for Doug Jones. As you heard the Secretary of State on earlier tonight, he did say to us that under Alabama law, if the vote is within 0.5 percentage point, it does qualify for a recount. Tonight, that seems to be what Moore is hinting at, saying this is not over. He is not conceding. There are provisional ballots and other things that will take some time to sift through. Not every vote is in, far from it. And his camp is hoping for a bit of a miracle, it sounds like, quoting from the Bible from Psalm 40, talking about God hearing his cry, inclining to hear his cry, to lift him out of the, quote, miry clay. And essentially what they're doing is hoping on what would be their last hope here is to get this vote within 0.5 percentage point and somehow be able to trigger that recount. Brett Baer has been leading our coverage tonight from the Fox News Decision Desk, joins us now. All right, Brett, not a concession tonight.
No, there are other Bible verses that say it's over. I tell you what, I think that the numbers that we're looking at, it could be 3, could be 4 points. Just looking at the projections right now, the raw vote total is roughly 9,000. We had 22,044 write-ins. You talked with Chris Steyerwalt earlier about this. 22,000, that's double the difference. And there you see the lead is increasing on the raw vote total, 670 now to 649. just looking at the map, looking where the votes are, it doesn't seem like it's going to get to that 0.5%, not even close. More like it's expanding and not contracting. So I think that eventually you're going to see from the Moore campaign a concession.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, you know, in watching all the data that we were getting in this Fox News voter analysis, one of the groups we were really watching were white evangelicals, because I think they went by 90% or more for Mitt Romney in the last big race there, the presidential race. Tonight, the split was for Moore 74%, Jones 22%. So it wasn't enough to put Moore over the top, at least not unless something miraculous happens with what's remaining to come in. But certainly a drop off from what we saw for Mitt Romney. And you'll remember there was a lot of conversation about whether evangelicals would vote for a Mormon candidate. Even less of them felt like voting for Roy Moore tonight, apparently.
No, that's true. And listen, I just listened to the other conversation. This is apples and oranges to the Virginia race. I mean, it's just completely different. This was a very flawed candidate. These allegations overwhelmed all of the coverage. And his first interview with Sean Hannity was really bad as far as a candidate making a pitch or trying to stop the bleeding on a story that was getting out of hand for his campaign. Now, he fought back in part because of all of the other allegations that were flying and accusations and resignations that were happening on the Democratic side and in the world of Hollywood. But it overwhelmed, and just the write-ins alone, and you saw the president's tweet mentioning that number in what was actually a very gracious tweet, if you think about where the president has been on commenting on some of these races.
Yeah, the GOP certainly did not want to lose a Senate seat. That's not helpful for Supreme Court nominations or major legislation or anything else they have going on over there. But in a way, does this eliminate some sort of headache that they would have had to deal with moving forward? Because apparently the word was there was going to be a 10 a.m. meeting tomorrow with the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell to get everybody in the GOP on the same page if Roy Moore won. Because, you know, we heard so much conversation about, do they seat him right away? Do they seat him or refer him to the Ethics Committee? What do they do? At least for now, they've lost a vote, but they don't have to deal with that part of the conversation.
Exactly. And listen, over the past few days, you've seen the mantra that is starting to develop about the president's accusers and calls for him to resign and investigations. And I think you're going to see more of that. If you had Roy Moore in that seat, the GOP establishment believed that that was going to be a real problem in 2018. Doug Jones is going to be a Democrat. He's probably going to hold the line on some things. But if he wants to get reelected in 2020, he's going to have to check the box in what Alabama believes, at least some of that. Because if you put policies of the Trump agenda up for a vote in Alabama, it would be an overwhelming win.
Yeah, and I heard somebody refer to him tonight. You may remember who this was. I can't remember off the top of my head. As potentially, a Senator Manchin out of Alabama, because he is also somebody who is a conservative, moderately conservative Democrat. He knows how the voters at home feel. And I was there in West Virginia covering a Senate race when he ran. And there were people on both sides of the aisle who loved him, who felt like he was true to West Virginia values, that he wasn't going to just toe the party line. Do you think that's the space that Doug Jones is going to be forced into if he wants to be successful in 2 years?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Manchin, Heidi Heitkamp, Joe Donnelly fits all of that. So far, we should point out, Democrats have held the line when the Democratic leadership has said vote this way, even not discussing tax reform, not to vote to argue tax reform on the Senate floor. So I think it'll be interesting to see how Doug Jones votes. I do believe that this race, as we called it, is going to turn out to be about 3 or 4 points. And I'll note that President Trump weighed in on 3 elections over the past 3 months. Luther Strange, Ed Gillespie, and Roy Moore. All 3 of them are losses. Now, does it tie directly to President Trump, or does it tied to Steve Bannon playing the other side? We don't know how that's going to fall out, but the first reaction from the president was to congratulate Jones and say the write-ins caused this loss.
Yeah, and as we get those final numbers in the coming weeks, we're going to learn a lot more about exactly how that all filters out, but unlikely at this point that the Roy Moore camp gets to the 0.5 percentage spacing between the 2 candidates that they need to get to a recount. So we'll continue to watch it. Excellent coverage as always tonight, Brett. Thank you.
Thanks, Shannon. We'll see you.
All right, let's bring back our panel.